In October 1347, Europe was hit by one of the most deadly diseases on earth. This tragedy takes on many names: pestilence, Black Death, Black Plague, and bubonic plague. Due to so many plague-related deaths during the Middle Ages, many Europeans were forced to make compromises such as changing jobs, their economy, their environment, commerce, and family ideals in order to survive. The Middle Ages were nicknamed the Dark Ages. But the Middle Ages weren't called the Dark Ages just because of the bubonic plague. The Middle Ages lasted from 476 to 1500. High Middle Ages is when the bubonic plague hit. The era was already plagued by the illness and many wars. The wars were fought mostly because of religion and power. Wars weren't the only battle, though. Poverty was common from the overwhelming amount of people in Europe. Wealth was hard to come by, as well as some food for some Europeans. Owning land was almost essential to being wealthy and having high social status. The wealthy, who owned significant amounts of land, were able to make money by renting the land and potentially selling it. Trade was also very important in the Dark Ages. A trade went throughout the world called the Silk Road. The Silk Road, similar to triangular trade, traded raw and valuable resources from many countries. Sometimes wars would stop for short periods of time so merchants could trade. Wars produced casualties, but not as many casualties as the bubonic plague. The plague killed approximately 20 million people over the span of 4 years. No one would forget this tragedy. Bubonic plague did not just exist in Europe. The plague was spread throughout the world in the Middle Ages, but it did not just exist in the Middle Ages. The plague has been here much longer and is still among the world today. Comparing current viruses to the bubonic plague has shocking results. Over the span of 4 years, Ebola kills approximately 40,000 people. The Black Death killed 500 times that amount in the same span of time. Another current illness, measles, kills an average of 2,000 people in 4 years. The Black Plague's deaths are 10,000 times that amount. Bubonic plague is still around now, and only an average of 12 people die from the bubonic plague now over the span of 4 years. Compared to the pestilence in 1347 through 1353, the current death rate is approximately 1.5 million times lower than the Middle Ages illness. How did the death rate get so much lower? After an outbreak of the bubonic plague in the 1900s, an antibiotic was created. Today, doctors use streptomycin and/or gentamicin to fight the plague. Europe, however, did not have the technology in 1347 to fight off the plague when it came. Some plague doctors were hired, even though none could cure the plague. The doctors wore masks resembling beaks that would often hold fragrant spices or flowers so that they did not have to smell rotting flesh when they did an autopsy. Bubonic plague is caused by a bacterium known as Yersinia pestis. Yersinia pestis, or Y. pestis, infects rats. Then, when Xenopsilla chapis, the scientific name for the infamous rat flea, feasted on the rats, the bacteria was transferred to them. The fleas would bite humans, transferring the plague to them. When humans got the disease, 3 forms of bubonic plague were likely to occur. One form, the bubonic variant, gave swelling in the buboes. Buboes are lymph nodes located commonly in the stomach, groin, armpits, and neck. Italian poet Giovanni Boccaccio wrote, "Certain swellings, either on the groin or under the armpits, wax to the bigness of a common apple, others to the size of an egg, some more and some less, and these vulgar, named plague boils." Eventually, the places would turn black, hence the name Black Death. Once turned black, the body parts would fall off. When this form struck, someone would have a mere week. Another variant attacked the blood system, septicemic. Another form, pneumomatic, attacked the respiratory system. Pneumomatic has evolved into another current illness, pneumonia. Both attack the lungs. When you had septicemic or pneumomatic, you only had 1 to 3 days to live. Historians speculate that the Black Death originated in China. The army of Kipchak Khan Janabag was infected by the plague. Since his army was dying, Janabag catapulted corpses infected with the Black Death into the town of Kaffa to infect his enemies. Ships bearing spices, silk, and other valuable resources from Kaffa that were traveling to the Mediterranean had rats and fleas infected with Y. pestis on board. They spread the plague to the crew on the ship. Despite Italy not letting the ship in because the sailors were evidently ill, the rats and fleas got off the ship and spread the disease into Europe. Europeans were confused by the plague. Some Europeans claimed it was the end of the world. Others fled and didn't say anything at all. Because of the plague, all Europeans had to make compromises in their lifestyle. Some big compromises Europe had to make included jobs and the economy, physical surroundings, commerce, and family ideals. Many Europeans had to change jobs when the plague hit because of insufficient employees. Wages actually went up because of this change. The new jobs paid much more than the old. For example, farmers would need to change jobs from insufficient people to work, so they might change jobs to be a sheep wrangler, which makes much more money. When Europeans died, others got better jobs and social standing. More wealth and more land were given to the poor. Good things did come from the tragedy. The economy compromised too. Even if Europeans didn't change jobs, they still demanded higher wages because of the lack of people. The landowners needed employees to work their land, therefore they had to renegotiate the wages of the farmers. The economy also had a lack of jobs in some areas because they were jobs that included travel. So the bubonic plague could spread farther, or the traveler could get the plague. Some Europeans that had jobs that involved traveling could no longer work in that field because travel could allow the plague to spread farther. In addition, those Europeans ran the risk of contracting the plague by visiting places where there was a potential outbreak. The plague did not just impact humans, it also infected animals such as sheep and cows. The sheep deaths were so bad that another conflict Europeans faced was wool shortage. Finally, people were afraid of getting sick, and as a result they closed their stores. Also, many customers died, so they did not have people to sell items to. The high number of casualties required the Europeans to compromise the environment. Europeans were dying so quickly that churches couldn't keep up. They buried people almost every hour. In the Decameron, Giovanni Boccaccio said, "A great many breathed their last in public streets. Day and night, a large number perished in their homes, and it was only by the stench of their decaying bodies that they proclaimed their death to their neighbors." A person would come around to collect the bodies and take them to church. There were too many bodies for each one to have their own graves. Mass graves housed the dead instead. Dr. Stephen Berg, History Department Chair at Shippensburg University, says,
"The Pope ended up blessing the Rhone River and basically turning it into a graveyard. Was clearly not the way that it was meant to be."
Europeans had to stop trade, which was very important to their economy. Europeans could not have some resources they desired. Since the trade went throughout the world, the plague could easily be spread and was deemed not worth the risk. Ironically, resources were the very reason the plague was spread throughout Europe. Because of the trade disruption, manufacturing was stopped due to the lack of resources. To stay healthy, the Europeans had to compromise their family ideals. Some Europeans abandoned their sisters, brothers, parents, spouses, and children. According to Giovanni Boccaccio, brother abandoned brother. Sick children would be left to die by their own parents. In The Plague in Siena, an Italian chronicle, Angelo di Terra stated that he buried his 5 children with his own hands. He said, "There was no one who wept for any death, for all awaited death, and so many died that all believed it was the end of the world." In conclusion, Europeans needed to compromise in their lives in the Middle Ages when the Black Death hit, because so many people had died and were dying. Europeans were forced to make compromises such as changing jobs, their economy, environment, commerce, and family ideals in order to survive. Humans will have to compromise due to nature, and the Middle Age Europeans are the perfect example.